introduction, they're always, they're so complimentary. I want to come out here and give a cruise just so I can hear their compliments. We're going to be on the ship, or I should say on the boat today, for about 90 minutes. And in that time, we're going to talk about history. I'm going to talk a little bit, I'm going to tell you some stories. We're going to look at buildings. And of course, this is an architecture cruise. So we are going to now, why all glass? Well, they wanted to look from the inside out and the outside in. They wanted this idea of transparency. Now, if you look at the top, that's the carbon fiber roof. Now, they say no, but they must be blind. Does that not look like the top of your MacBook Pro or anybody's MacBook Pro? They say no. All right, the next thing I want you to look at is the bridge in front of us. It's called the Michigan Avenue Bridge. It was completed in 1920, and it was designed by Edward Bennett. Edward Bennett had a friend, his name, and a colleague, his name was Daniel Burnham, and together they established the Jean-Baptiste Point de Sable. He was the first non-indigenous person to live here in Chicago. I got a little bit more to tell you about him and his wife, but I'll do that on the way back. Now we're going to go up and back twice, so if you missed something the first time around, don't worry about it. I'm probably going to talk about it on the way back. The developers were so sure that every jeweler that is on Wabash was going to want to move into this building. And they were very disappointed when they did everything right, and the jewelers said, no, we don't want to be here. So if you actually look on the side of the building, there's a JB, but jewelers never ever came to this building. And I want to talk about that little temple on the top there. It's the Stratosphere Lounge, or it used to be the Stratosphere Lounge. This building opened in 26. Prohibition did not end till 1933. So I won't ask for a show of hands because you're all smart people. And each room has a different purpose. So this here, is where our Vietnam Memorial is. But if you kind of keep going down the river, you'll see, places for people to sit. It looks like a theater. You'll see people gathered around tables, and you'll also see a floating garden. Modern building, but it's concrete. So it's different than the other modern building I showed you. This type of architecture is called brutalist. And most people do not like brutalist architecture. They think they don't like concrete. But this one, I think, is really... The antenna on top used to be a beacon. And this is in the early days. The building was built in 1930. The early days where we only had one airport, it was Midway Airport, and we didn't have a lot of good ways to lead them to Midway. So buildings had these beacons, and you used to be able to glass, which looks like the river. So this building is referential. It's a postmodern building. It's fun, it's playful, and it's referential. It is paying homage to the Chicago bridges. Coming up, I'm like, drink water, and then I'll tell you what's coming up. Well, maybe we should look to our left first, and then I'll show you what's on our right. I want you to look at this building with the front curve on it, or the curve on the front, I should say. It's green glass, and the address is 33 West Wacker. It was completed in 1983, and it was designed by right-hand turn. We're on the main stem of the river, and we're going to make a right-hand turn, and we are going to be going on to the North Branch. So that is, another referential item. Now, the other thing about postmodern buildings is many of them have reflective glass, and so here you can see that it's reflecting here. So that doesn't make any sense. Well, who needs a freezer that side? Well, Chicago was known for their meat packing, and so we would have to put the meat somewhere before it went on the trains, the refrigerator cars, to leave the city. So it would go right here in this building. So it became condominiums, as I said, in 1981, and Harry Weiss was the developer for that. Now, he was a brave soul, because I'm a Chicago native, and I can tell you that if we had a breeze like today, being close to the river, it would be very smelly. At that time, it was extremely polluted, and you were like, ooh, yuck. So you had to come down on a calm day, for sure. So turning these into condominiums, 79 building, and it was a much smaller health club back at that time. But they decided, and you can see how kind of plain it is, that they weren't going to do anything to this side because it faced the river, and they were trying to hide the river at that time because it was dirty, it was smelly, and so they turned their back on the river. Now, I just read that there's over broken, because this is, I'm a little bit older than some of you here, and so this is the Chicago I remember. We would come down and, do whatever, but I remember all of these old buildings. Now, this was pretty dilapidated, even up to 30, 35. The tour, I said about structure. Internal structure is what holds the building up. So normally you'd have something inside and then you would put the cladding on it. But in this case, they took some of the structure and they moved it to the outside. So those upside down V's are nice. They're nice to look at. They add to the building. But they're out there for structural reasons. And anytime, and we're going to see this several times during our tour, you see something on the outside of the building, you should question why it's anyhow. It was next day delivery, so we won't go there. So we were missing just a little bit. But he was an extremely. Does anyone here remember Montgomery Ward's? Yeah, okay, a few people. Okay, they went out of business around 2000. Up on our right, this is an Art Deco building, and this is One River Place. I want you to look at the deco ornamentation. Remember, it's subtle, and so you see the ornamentation at the level right above the river walk, and then you also see the ornamentation on top. The balconies are, all geometric. You'll see the building in just a moment. The Chicago Tribune is one of our Chicago newspapers, and it's been in business since I can't remember the 1840s, I believe it is. And this used to be where they actually printed the papers. Meatpacking companies, and so 1848, the Illinois and Michigan Canal was completed, and so it connected the Great Lakes to the Mississippi River, and Chicago was right in the middle. So we had a perfect location to become a center of commerce, and we did that. So we had everything here in Chicago except garbage pickup. It was owned by the Chicago and Northwestern. Now it's owned by the Union Pacific. Now, the type of bridge I'm talking about are called trunnion bascule bridge. The trunnion is just, a big, like a cross. They could close the bridge because, as you can see, the river is not very wide. So to get from one side to the other, pedestrians and whatever carriages or cars at that time needed to get across. Okay, this coming up on our right, before this building was built, there used to be an old wooden building here, and it was a convention center, and it was where Abraham Lincoln was nominated to be president in 1870. So, an interesting observation. I like history, and I like bridges, and I like Chicago. Should have been building Art Deco, but the architects and the owner said, you know what? The opera is classical, and so we're going to build a classical building as well. Where we see that flat wall there, that's the back of the stages, and surrounding it there is, as you can tell, a lot of office buildings. So this closed in 1920. Again, X's are on the outside, so you know that this building, obviously, there was going to be something about it where they wanted the inside column free. And they were going to put the support on the outside. So this used to be a trading floor, back in the day when traders used to scream across the room instead of do work on the computer. At some point, the government decided that 1996 actually, that this building was not working properly because there was very little technology in it, and it was taking too long, and it was just a mess. So they decided they would just shut it down, and they would build a new post office. So this building was shut down from 1990. All right, coming up on our left, this whole area here is called South Bank. There are two buildings that belong on South Bank, and it's the black steel and glass building, maybe a gray almost building, that says Reed, and then the building that's at a right angle next to it. This used to be our old Grand Central Station, and so as they were, kind of going through and, excavating there somewhere, not exactly, I pick up a Chicago Tribune, and there it is on the front page. Mrs. O'Leary and the cow have been exonerated. What? How does this happen? Well, it turns out that Mrs. O'Leary and her cow, like most other farmers, did not milk their cow at 9 o'clock at night. You milk your cow right after dinner, and then you go to bed because you're getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning. We'll make it an octagon. Instead of making it black, we'll make it that coral or pink color. The windows will be totally, not in order at all. And then up on the top, and you can see it from here, they put a lantern. That lantern tracks. And maybe they'll be clearer when we get to the next part here. So if you want to build over a building, you can't just decide, I'm going to build, because you don't own that land. And if you don't own the land, you can't build it. But you can do something. You can either purchase it or you can lease it. And it's called air rights. So, no matter whatever is underneath you, you can purchase, that or lease it, and you'll be able to building. Coming up on our left, that large limestone building is 2 North Riverside Plaza. It is a 1929 building, and it was designed by Halliburton and Root. It used to be called the Chicago Daily News Building, and it's where we printed our evening newspaper. It cost a penny. So they figured, and they wanted to put it out at night because they figured at the end of the day, people had change in their pocket, and they usually had a penny, so it was worthwhile. So I want you to look at the Art Deco designs on the building. As soon as we get under the bridge, you're going to see a small building that protrudes out, and then you're going to see a light. So right here, and you see down below there, it's hard to see with the sun in your eyes, you could see some Art Deco ornamentation. One of the other items that they used in Art Deco ornamentation was things from King Tut's tomb. It was about then that, it was a rural building, and then it kind of projects out for 8 floors. Then you finally have your high-rise. So it's a concrete core building. It chills the water at night when the electricity rates are low. They pipe it into the building that needs it. The building uses that, and then they send that same water back that night, and this cycle goes on and on. So there are things that can be done to keep the buildings more sustainable. Marina City, and maybe it looks familiar to you. It's the same architect. This is a 1967 building, and Bertrand Goldberg was the architect. If you like movies, this is the building you're going to see the most in movies, if it's a Chicago movie. The way it works, there's a concrete core of the building. That's what's holding it up. There's an elevator in that shaft, and then the condominiums come out, and then they're all kind of pie-shaped. I've never had an opportunity to be in one, and you know, designed by the office of Mies van der Rohe. Mies died in 1969, but he had some input into this building. Mies had a saying, you know, God is in the details. So even though not every mid-century modern building is built the same, and Mies thought his was built with the most perfection. So give us a minute. You can see them now, and you can see the top of them. I want you to notice the balconies and also the color. The coloring explains when you ask her why does she have those curvy balconies. It's so, well, a couple things. Wind. Remember, we're always worried. We've seen, you know, where people are living down here. We've seen condominiums, we've seen townhouses. People want to live downtown. You know, when I was young, you know, I wanted to raise my kids in the suburbs. Grew up in Chicago, raised my kids in the suburbs. I couldn't wait to get back. You know, for me, the suburbs didn't have the action, didn't have the difference. I like the differences. You know, war. So then it had several years of being nothing, and finally, you know, it became Navy Pier. Now I want to show you one more thing out here. If you look all the way out, you can see there are two flags directly in front of us, and you can see it looks like there are two gates that are opened. And so that was built when those gates closed. It was built to keep the lake water, you know, from pouring into the river. I don't know why they're open today. So, you know, we don't want to have, it was a result of a lawsuit actually. We don't want all the water, you know. Take these restrooms and they flip them up and down. And actually, the part of the building that's coming out towards the river, you can actually see the restrooms there because they did it, you know, they let them show. And so that's how they got the building. Now, there's 3 towers. This is the 3rd tallest building in Chicago, and that would be that tower that's 95 feet high. So I want you to look up there, and what do you see? You see a hole. I'm like, why is there a hole in that tower? Now remember, I talked about wind tunneling, and what happens with wind? It sways the building.